In this video, we're going to talk about layout files in a little more detail. Creating a layout file is really easy. It's just one .cfm file, and it goes in your layouts folder. By default anyway. You can change that if you'd like, but for most web apps, I would typically just leave it in the default location. Technically, just creating a .cfm file and putting it in your layouts folder, that makes it a layout. However, it won't do anything layout-like until you do one more step. Somewhere in the layout file, you need to add this line of code. Render view. That render view function call is where the contents of your view will get loaded. So for example, if we're on the users list or users detail page, or handler rather, that line where the render view is at, that's where the user detail view and related markup will be combined with the layout before the entire page is rendered out to your web browser. This is pretty similar to the way most other MVC frameworks are constructed. It's also similar to how themes in CMS engines work, such as ContentBox. The layout is all the same UI stuff you'd normally put in your site's header and footer files, except instead of it being separate header.cfm and footer.cfm files, as you can see here, Coldbox takes the opposite approach. You don't actually include header and footer things into your view pages. Coldbox sticks the view inside the layout, and the whole thing gets rendered out to the web browser for you by the Coldbox engine. The default layout file is main.cfm. This got created for us when we did Coldbox create app in one of the earlier videos. And it of course already included the render view function call that it needs, so it will work with our application. You can change the default layout by going into your Coldbox CFC file in the config folder. You go to the layout settings section and change the default layout property to whatever you'd like the new default to be. Remember to restart Coldbox after you do this for these changes to take effect. You can also override the layout, and not just the default one with the Coldbox config file, but in any handler in your application you can override it as well. There's a method called event.setLayout that can be used, and you can call that in any of your event handlers. You simply pass in the name of a valid layout you want to use from your app's layout folder, minus the .cfm extension, refresh your page, and it starts to get used. So here I've got event.setLayout. I'm just going to uncomment that line of code, and you can see I'm calling it with PDF passed in here. That's because over here in my layouts folder, I have a file pdf.cfm that looks like so. It's using the CF document tags, which as you probably know, turn your web page into an Acrobat PDF file. And just like in our main.cfm layout that we looked at earlier, where we've got that render view function call in here, and that's where the contents of our web page get glued inside this layout. Even though this layout looks completely different, it's not generating headers and footers at all. It's simply turning my content into a PDF file. It's putting a header and footer on the PDF pages themselves though. I still have a render view function call in here, just like I did in main.cfm. If I go back here to my browser, you can see here's what users list looked like previously. And now I've turned on that event.setLayout PDF line of code. Let's refresh the page and see what happens. It turned our entire web page into an Acrobat PDF file. And we did that all from the power of layouts in Coldbox. We can take that a step farther, and you can actually override layouts and combine them together as well. So you can have one layout nested inside another layout. Here's our PDF layout that we just looked at a minute ago that created this output for us with our web page header and footer stuff stripped away, but the contents of that view are now visible for us, and it's clearly turned into a PDF file. That was done by using our PDF layout and this render view function call that I've got commented out right now. Well, we can replace render view with render layout, and you can pass render layout in the name of another layout CFM file from your layouts folder. In this case, I'm including main.cfm. And since main.cfm does have all of the site header and footer things in it, and it's also got a call to render view inside here, I no longer need this call to render view in my PDF layout since main.cfm is taking care of that for us, and we're simply going to render the main.cfm layout here from inside our PDF layout. I'm still doing the exact same thing here in my handler. I'm calling the PDF layout as our starting point. The PDF layout is then going to render itself, and it's going to take care of rendering the main layout file, and the main layout file is going to take care of rendering our view content. So when I combine those things together and refresh our web page, you can see we still have a PDF output, but now it's got more of the site header information on it that we had in our site header and footer stuff from the web page version of this content. It's also got the footer information in here. You can see not all of it renders real nice and cleanly in a PDF file. That's more just a side effect of the content in this particular layout. The main takeaway here, though, is to see that you can combine layouts inside other layouts and get a lot of really powerful functionality out of using layouts inside Coldbox. Let's look at another layout example real quick here. In my layouts folder, I also have plain.cfm, and it's pretty similar to the main CFM file we've looked at before. One thing you might notice that's different is up here in the head section of main.cfm, we were including a couple style sheets to make the page, be styled a certain way. We also included several bits of JavaScript at the bottom, and a lot of the markup in the main CFM layout had a lot of CSS classes being used because of those CSS files. Plain is sort of a real quickly stripped down version of that. There's no CSS being included up here. Some of the top level navigation stuff doesn't have the CSS classes included in it. Some of it does, but it's not actually getting used anymore. And down at the bottom, there's no JavaScript being included here. So this is more of a plain layout as opposed to the main one that we have over here. I'm going to go back to my handler, and I'm just going to turn on this line of code, event.setLayout. We're going to pass in plain to use that layout for us. Now let's go back here to the browser, refresh, and you can see the content is all still there, but it of course obviously has a different UI feel to it than it did previously. It's not pretty anymore. It's now our plain layout. We made that event.setLayout function call here inside functions list. If I click on the details links over here, it'll snap us to the detail page, which still has the main CFM layout look and feel to it. So if I want to have the same look and feel applied to my list page that I have on my details page, I'm going to have to go back here to my handler, and I'm going to have to copy this line of code out of list and add it into my details handler as well. Now when I go back here, let's go back to our user list page and refresh just to start from the same starting point. I'll click on Ringo Starr. And now you can see when I'm on my details page, it also has the plain layout look and feel for us. So this is all well and good, except what if this were a really big handler with, let's say, 20 or 30 different actions inside it? I'd have to copy and paste that line of code 20 or 30 different times to make all of my pages get this overridden layout functionality in this user CFC handler, right? You might have heard the term DRY before in other programming conversations. DRY stands for don't repeat yourself. The idea is if you find you're copy and pasting chunks of code over and over again, that's probably a sign that you're not really using the best design pattern available to you. Maybe it's a good sign to take a step back, take a break, and see if there's a better solution for this. And there is actually a better solution in this case. I'm going to get rid of the event.setLayout call here in my details handler, and I'm going to comment out the one that we had in our list page as well. So those are both going to go back to being the fancier looking CSS for us. Go back here and reload the page. Click on that, and now we have both list and detailed are back looking the way they were previously, right? Reload that page. Now let's go back to our code. So how do we make one change so that both list and details get the plain layout? I can take that same event.setLayout call, and I'm going to use the pre-handler that we learned about in a previous video. I've already got the line of code in there. I'm just going to uncomment it, save, reload our list page. Now that's using the plain layout, and when I click on the detail page, that's also using the plain layout for me as well. And of course, any other handler in this CFC will automatically get that pre-handler functionality called before the handler itself gets executed. So we only have to change the layout in one spot now, and no matter how many different actions we have in this CFC, they'll all get that new layout for us. So maybe you have a larger application that's got, say, 5 different handlers, and you want each one to have a different layout. Maybe they have different color schemes, or maybe each handler CFC is for a different department in your intranet, things like that. You can just simply set the layout for each handler once in the pre-handler for each of those CFCs, and you never have to repeat yourself ever again. No matter how many different actions exist in that handler, it will always get picked up by the pre-handler functionality when you call setLayout, just like it did when we called setLayout down in the action methods themselves.